Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Un's Harmony and watched the massive alien station grow larger on the main screen. Kepler Station looked like a metal flower floating in space with dozens of arms reaching out in all directions. Ships from 12 different alien races moved in and out of the docking bays like busy insects. Jake had seen this view many times over the past 3 years, but it still made him feel small. "Captain, we are receiving docking instructions from Station Control," said Lieutenant Dan Walker from the communications station. His voice carried the same careful politeness that all humans used when talking to aliens. It was important to sound respectful and humble. The Galactic Council expected it from younger races like humanity. "Thank you, Dan. Take us in nice and slow. We don't want to seem aggressive," Jake replied. He smoothed down his dark blue diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance in the reflection of a nearby console. Everything had to be perfect for these meetings. The aliens judged humans on every small detail. Commander Lisa Park entered the bridge carrying a datapad filled with notes for today's negotiations. She had spent the morning reviewing trade proposals and cultural exchange programs. Lisa was the best diplomat Earth had ever produced, as she spoke 6 alien languages fluently. Even so, the council members treated her like a clever child who might someday grow up to be useful. "Any word from the council about our latest proposal, Captain?" Lisa asked as she took her position next to Jake's command chair. Her brown hair was pulled back in the simple style that aliens seem to prefer on human females. "Nothing too fancy or attention-grabbing? Nothing yet." Counselor Vexthara's office sent the usual message about reviewing our submission with appropriate consideration, Jake said. He tried to keep the frustration out of his voice, but Lisa caught it anyway. She had worked with him long enough to read his moods. The Harmony docked with a soft thump that barely registered through the ship's hull. Jake straightened his uniform one more time and nodded to Lisa. "Ready for another round of diplomatic?" "Smiling, Commander. Always, sir." "Maybe today will be different," Lisa said, but they both knew it would not be. The pattern had been the same for 3 years. Humans would present careful proposals for trade or technology sharing. The aliens would listen with amused expressions and then politely explain why humanity was not ready for such advanced arrangements. They walked through the station's corridors, together followed by Dr. Alex Carter, who served as their cultural advisor. Alex carried recording equipment that documented every interaction for study back on Earth. The recordings helped human diplomats understand alien behavior, patterns, and social structures. What the recordings really showed was how little respect the galaxy had for humanity. The council chambers were designed to make visitors feel insignificant. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into shadows. 12 different seating areas were arranged in a circle with the Zephyrian platform elevated above all others. This was where High Counselor Vexthara held court over the lesser races. Other alien species filled their designated areas according to strict hierarchy. The Nexari, with their slug-like bodies, handled administrative duties from their lower platform. The crystalline Vorthak managed communications, and their sections glowed with soft blue light. The insect-like Krell controlled security, and their warriors stood at attention around the chamber. Perimeter. All of them served the Zephyrians, who had conquered most of known space before deciding that direct rule was too much work. Instead, they created the council system where other races could govern themselves as long as they followed Zephyrian guidance. It was slavery disguised as cooperation, and everyone knew it. Humans were given a small platform near the back of the chamber. The message was clear without words. Earth was barely worthy of acknowledgement, let alone partnership. Jake and his team took their seats and waited for Counselor Vexthara to notice them. The Zephyrian leader was tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the chamber lights. Her large black eyes showed no emotion as she reviewed the day's agenda. When she finally looked toward the human section, her expression was the same one someone might use when noticing an interesting insect. "Ah, yes, the humans have requested another audience," Vexthara said in her musical voice that somehow managed to sound condescending even when speaking standard galactic. "Commander Park, you may present your species' latest proposal." Lisa stood and activated her datapad. She had rehearsed this presentation dozens of times. Honored Counselor, we submit for your consideration a mutual trade agreement that would benefit both human colonies and council member worlds. Our agricultural expertise could help feed growing populations while your technological guidance would accelerate human development. The other council members whispered among themselves as Lisa spoke. Jake caught fragments of their conversations through his universal translator. The words primitive and amusing came up frequently. Dr. Carter's recording equipment captured every slight for later analysis. Your proposal shows typical human optimism, Vexthara replied when Lisa finished. However, your species lacks the evolutionary refinement necessary for true partnership within our civilization. Your people are young and eager, which can be endearing, but also dangerous. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when humanity has learned proper galactic etiquette, we might reconsider. The dismissal was delivered with a smile that never reached the counselor's eyes. Jake felt his hands clench into fists but forced them to relax. Getting angry would only prove the aliens right about human emotional instability. Instead, he smiled politely and nodded as if the insult was reasonable advice. We understand, Counselor. Humanity appreciates your wisdom and guidance. Perhaps we could schedule another meeting next month to discuss smaller areas of cooperation, Lisa said. Her voice remained perfectly calm despite the humiliation. Of course, dear. Your persistence is quite charming, even if it is ultimately futile. My assistant will arrange something suitable. Vexthara waved one elegant hand as if shooing away a pet that had performed an adequate trick. The meeting ended the same way they always did. Humans thanked the council for their time and patience. Aliens nodded with expressions of benevolent superiority. Everyone pretended this was normal diplomatic interaction instead of systematic degradation. As they walked back to their ship, Jake noticed how other species moved out of their way in the corridors. Not out of respect, but out of the casual indifference reserved for harmless creatures. A Krell warrior bumped into Dr. Carter without apologizing. Two Nexari officials laughed at some private joke while staring at Lisa's human appearance back aboard the Harmony. Jake sealed the bridge and activated privacy screens that would prevent alien monitoring. Only then did he allow his diplomatic mask to slip. How many more years of this, Lisa? How long do we keep smiling while they treat us like zoo animals? As long as it takes, Captain. Earth's orders are clear. We maintain friendly relations and gather intelligence. The long-term benefits outweigh short-term pride, Lisa replied, but Jake could see the strain in her eyes too. Dr. Carter was already reviewing his recordings and making notes. The behavioral patterns are consistent across all species, Captain. They view humans as evolutionarily inferior and therefore safe to ignore. Their entire power structure depends on maintaining strict hierarchy with themselves at the top. What none of the aliens knew was that every word, every gesture, every casual insult was being carefully documented and transmitted back to Earth. In hidden facilities on Luna and Mars, other humans studied these recordings with very different purposes. In mind, they remembered when humanity's politeness was a choice, not a survival strategy. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were capable of. They were wrong. The emergency signal reached the INS Harmony 6 months after the latest humiliation at Kepler Station. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing diplomatic reports when Lieutenant Dan Walker's voice crackled over the intercom with unusual urgency. Captain, we have a priority distress call from New Haven Colony. They are requesting immediate assistance, Don said. Jake could hear the tension in his communication officer's voice even through the static. Jake was on the bridge within minutes followed closely by Commander Lisa Park and Dr. Alex Carter. The main screen showed the location of New Haven on the edge of human space, where brave families had built farms on a world the Galactic Council considered worthless. It was a 3-day journey at maximum speed. What kind of assistance, Don? Jake asked as he settled into his command chair. Emergency calls from the colonies usually meant equipment failures or medical emergencies. The Harmony carried supplies and medical staff for exactly these situations. Unknown, sir. The transmission was badly damaged, but I caught fragments about Krell ships and casualties. They cut off mid-sentence and have not responded to our attempts at contact, Don replied while working frantically at his console to clean up the signal. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. Krell ships had no business in that sector unless they were conducting some kind of council operation. Human colonies were required to register all activities with local authorities, but New Haven had filed all proper paperwork months ago. Set course for New Haven maximum speed. Send word to Earth Command that we are responding to a colonial emergency, Jake ordered. He felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Something was very wrong, but standard diplomatic protocols required them to assume this was just a misunderstanding. The journey to New Haven felt longer than usual, even though they maintained emergency speed throughout. Lisa spent the time reviewing colonial records and council regulations, trying to find any explanation for Krell involvement. Dr. Carter prepared medical supplies and trauma equipment, based on the brief mention of casualties in the distress call. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near New Haven, the scene that greeted them made Jake's blood turn cold. Smoke rose from several locations across the main settlement. Agricultural fields that should have been green with crops were blackened and dead. The orbital communication relay was dark and silent. "My God," Lisa whispered as she stared at the devastation on the main screen. New Haven had been a thriving community of nearly 2,000 people just 6 months ago when Jake had delivered their annual medical supplies. Now it looked like a war zone. The Harmony entered orbit carefully while sensors scanned for any remaining threats. 3 Krell patrol ships had departed the system recently based on energy signatures, but the aliens were long gone. Whatever they had done here was finished. Jake led an away team down to the planet's surface where they found Mayor Ben Collins waiting with a group of survivors. Ben was a tough former soldier who had helped establish the colony 5 years earlier. Now he looked 20 years older with haunted eyes and bandages covering burn marks on his arms. "Captain Morrison, thank God you came. We were not sure anyone received our transmission before they destroyed the relay," Ben said as he shook Jake's hand. His grip was firm, but Jake could feel him trembling slightly. "What happened here, Ben? The damage looks extensive," Jake replied, while Dr. Carter immediately began treating injured colonists. Many of the survivors showed signs of chemical exposure along with various traumatic injuries. Ben led them through the settlement as he explained the events of 3 days ago. A Krell patrol ship had arrived without warning, claiming the colonists were farming in violation of Galactic Council regulations. When Ben produced the proper permits issued by the Council itself, the Krell commander declared them obvious forgeries. They said humans were too primitive to understand proper documentation. When I tried to explain that we followed every regulation exactly, they laughed and said Council permits were only valid for real civilizations. Ben's voice cracked with emotion as he recounted the aliens' words. The worst part came when the Krell began their punishment for the supposed violations. They used some kind of biological weapon to poison the crops and water supply. When colonists tried to protect their children from the contamination, Krell soldiers opened fire with energy weapons. Jake felt his diplomatic training warring with pure rage, as Ben described watching neighbors die while alien troops stood over them laughing. The Krell had taken particular pleasure in destroying the colony's medical facility while patients were still inside receiving treatment. They said humans bred too quickly anyway, and this would help solve the overpopulation problem. In this sector, Ben finished his account while staring at the ruins of what had been the colony school. 37 children had died there when Krell soldiers sealed the exits and filled the building with toxic gas. Dr. Carter completed his examination of the water supply and confirmed Jake's worst fears. The contamination was specifically designed to target human biology while leaving other species unaffected. This was not random violence or even simple cruelty. It was calculated genocide disguised as law enforcement. Deputy Kate Sullivan approached their group, carrying a datapad filled with documentation from the attack. Kate had been a legal clerk before joining the colony, and she understood the importance of evidence. Her recording of the entire incident would prove invaluable if they could ever get anyone to listen. Captain the Krell commander made several statements that contradict official council policy. He specifically said that human colonies were temporary experiments, and that the council was considering more permanent solutions to what he called the human problem. Kate reported while sharing her recordings, the casual way the aliens discussed. Exterminating human settlements made Jake's hands shake with suppressed fury. These were not the actions of a legitimate peacekeeping force. This was systematic oppression backed by overwhelming military superiority. Commander, Lisa immediately began preparing formal diplomatic protests through proper council channels. She documented every violation of established law and compiled evidence. That should force an investigation. Jake admired her dedication to peaceful solutions but suspected they would receive the same dismissive responses as always. The team spent 2 more days helping survivors and gathering evidence before departing. For Kepler Station, Jake filed emergency reports with Earth Command while Lisa prepared her diplomatic presentation. Dr. Carter analyzed biological samples that proved the weapons used were specifically designed to kill humans. Their arrival at Kepler Station followed the usual procedures, but this time Jake felt different walking through those corridors. The casual indifference of other species seemed more sinister now that he had seen what it led to. Every dismissive glance and condescending smile reminded him of children dying in a sealed school building. The council chambers looked the same as always, but Jake found himself studying the Krell security forces with new attention. These were the same creatures who had murdered colonists for trying to protect their families. They stood at attention around the chamber as if their recent genocide was just another routine assignment. Hi, Counselor Vexthara received their emergency petition with the same polite disinterest she showed all human concerns. Lisa presented the evidence methodically and professionally despite the horrific nature of what she was describing. The other council members listened with expressions of mild curiosity as if discussing weather patterns. Your colonial situation is indeed regrettable, Commander Park, but frontier settlements always carry inherent risks. The Krell Patrol was responding to legitimate concerns about regulatory compliance. Any casualties that occurred were unfortunate side effects of necessary enforcement actions. Vexthara delivered this response as if discussing crop reports rather than mass murder. The Nexari administrative official added that investigations into the incident would proceed according to standard protocols. This meant a formal review would begin in approximately 6 months and conclude whenever the council felt sufficient attention had been paid to human concerns. Jake watched Lisa maintain her diplomatic composure while receiving this response, but he could see the strain building behind her professional mask. 3 years of careful negotiation and cultural sensitivity had led to this moment where alien officials dismissed the murder of human children as acceptable collateral damage. The meeting ended with the council expressing sympathy for human losses, while making it clear that no changes in policy or enforcement procedures would be considered. Humans were reminded that expansion into frontier areas required acceptance of associated risks, including contact with Council security forces. As they returned to the Harmony, Jake noticed that other aliens in the station corridors seemed to be watching them more closely than usual, not with curiosity or concern, but with the calculating attention of predators evaluating potential prey. Word of New Haven had spread, and the galaxy was learning that humans could be killed without consequences. Back in the privacy of his quarters, Jake opened secure communications with Earth Command and transmitted everything they had learned. The response came back within hours, encrypted with codes that had not been used since the unification wars that brought peace to Earth. Dr. Emma Rodriguez loved her work at Prometheus Station, even though she had to watch alien colleagues take credit for her discoveries every day. The Joint Research Facility orbited a gas giant in neutral space where humans and council species supposedly worked together as equals. In reality, Emma knew that equality was just another human delusion. The aliens found amusing the quantum mechanics research progressed faster than anyone expected, largely due to human intuition about mathematical relationships that other species found incomprehensible. Emma's team consistently produced breakthroughs that advanced the entire field by decades. The Zephyrian research director always presented these discoveries as examples of superior alien guidance helping primitive humans reach beyond their natural limitations. Emma accepted these slights as part of the price for advancing human knowledge. She had learned to smile politely when her work was attributed to others, and to express gratitude for opportunities she had earned through brilliance and dedication. The research was what mattered, not the recognition. Her 8-year-old daughter, Maria, visited the station during school break as she did every year. Maria was bright and curious like her mother, with an endless fascination for how things worked. She asked questions that sometimes stumped the alien researchers, who were supposed to be humanity's intellectual superiors. The station maintained strict security protocols that separated different research areas according to species classification. Humans were restricted to basic sections, while more advanced facilities remained off-limits to their primitive minds. Maria understood these rules and followed them carefully during her previous visits. On the third day of her stay, Maria was exploring the public observation areas when she noticed an interesting energy pattern in one of the experimental chambers. Her mother had taught her to recognize quantum field fluctuations, and this one looked unusual. Following natural curiosity, she wandered toward the source to get a better view. The corridor she entered was marked with Zephyrian symbols that Maria could not read. She did not know she was violating security restrictions by walking toward the energy source that fascinated her young scientific mind. To her, it was just another part of the station, where adults conducted their mysterious experiments. Security Chief Kexmore found Maria standing in front of a quantum field generator, studying the energy patterns with obvious intelligence. Instead of simply escorting the child back to public areas, he saw something that triggered deep alien paranoia about human capabilities. "Human juvenile, what are you doing in this restricted area?" Kexmore demanded in his harsh mechanical voice. Zephyrian security officers were chosen for their lack of empathy rather than their reasoning abilities. "I was watching the pretty lights. They move in patterns like my mom showed me," Maria replied with the honest curiosity of a child who saw wonder in scientific phenomena. She had no idea that her casual understanding of quantum mechanics was something most adult aliens could not achieve. Kexmore interpreted her words as evidence of sophisticated espionage. In his mind, no human child could naturally comprehend advanced physics, which meant Maria must be a specially trained spy sent to steal Zephyrian secrets. The fact that she was only 8 years old made this explanation seem even more sinister to the paranoid alien mind. "You will submit to neural scanning to determine the extent of your infiltration programming," Kexmore announced while drawing a device that Emma would have recognized as a neural disruptor. The weapon was designed to scramble brain patterns and extract information from unwilling subjects. Maria tried to explain that she was just curious and meant no harm, but Kexmore had already decided she represented a threat to station security. The neural disruptor fired directly into her developing brain, sending massive electrical surges through neural pathways. Never designed to handle such violent intrusion, the child collapsed immediately as her nervous system shut down under the assault. Kexmore examined the readings from his device and noted with satisfaction that all signs of aggressive curiosity had been eliminated from the subject's brain patterns. Mission accomplished from his alien perspective. Dr. Rodriguez arrived at the medical bay to find her daughter in a coma with massive brain damage that affected every cognitive function. The human doctors could only watch helplessly as Maria's higher brain functions slowly shut down one by one. They requested emergency medical supplies from the nearest council facility, but were told that human medical emergencies did not qualify for priority status. Emma begged the Zephyrian medical staff to help save her daughter, but they refused, claiming that human neural chemistry was too primitive for their advanced treatments. They suggested that Maria's condition was probably an improvement, since human children were naturally prone to dangerous curiosity that needed to be controlled. Captain Jake Morrison received Emma's desperate call for assistance while the Harmony was conducting routine diplomatic missions in a nearby system. He immediately changed course for Prometheus Station. Despite knowing that interfering with council security matters would create significant political problems, the scene he found At the station made Jake's carefully maintained diplomatic composure crack for the first time in years. Emma sat beside her daughter's bed watching machines keep the child's body alive while her mind slowly died. Maria had been reduced to a vegetative state by an alien who saw curiosity as a security threat. They said she was obviously a spy because human juveniles cannot be trusted near sensitive equipment. When I asked how an 8-year-old could be a spy, they explained that human deception capabilities are more advanced than we admit. Emma's voice was hollow with grief and rage as she recounted the official explanation. Jake requested emergency medical evacuation to the nearest human facility, but station commander Vorthak denied permission, claiming that moving the patient would interfere with ongoing security investigations. Maria would remain on the station until Council authorities determined whether her presence had compromised classified research. The cruel irony was that Maria's innocent curiosity had indeed revealed something important about human capabilities. Her casual understanding of quantum mechanics that aliens found threatening was actually evidence of how much humans had been hiding their true intellectual potential. The Council's fear of human espionage was completely backwards. Commander Lisa Park attempted to negotiate Maria's release through proper diplomatic channels, but encountered the same bureaucratic walls that protected alien interests from human concerns. The Nexari administrative staff expressed sympathy while explaining that security matters required careful review before any changes could be authorized. Dr. Alex Carter documented every aspect of the incident for his cultural studies. But this time his recordings captured something new in human behavior. The careful politeness and diplomatic restraint that defined human interactions with aliens was beginning to crack under the weight of accumulated injustices. Jake watched Maria die slowly over 3 days while alien bureaucrats debated whether her 8-year-old brain contained dangerous military secrets. The child who had loved watching quantum energy patterns was reduced to biological functions maintained by machines. Her curiosity and intelligence were gone forever. High Counselor Vexthara arrived on the 4th day with a Krell battle group claiming that human threats against station security required immediate intervention. Jake's request for medical assistance had been interpreted as acts of aggression against legitimate Council authority. Your species continues to disappoint, Captain Morrison. First you fail to properly supervise your offspring, then you make threats against your betters when faced with consequences of your negligence. Perhaps it is time the Council reconsidered whether humanity deserves even associate membership in galactic civilization. Vexthara delivered this judgment while standing over Maria's dying body, the casual cruelty of discussing human membership status while a child died from alien brutality finally broke something fundamental in Jake's mind. For 3 years he had smiled politely while his species was systematically degraded and humiliated. He had accepted insults and abuse as the price of peaceful coexistence, but watching Maria Rodriguez die because an alien considered her curiosity threatening made Jake realized that peaceful coexistence was impossible with creatures who saw human children as security threats. Some truths could not be ignored no matter how much diplomacy demanded it. As Vexthara continued her lecture about human inadequacy, Jake felt his personal communicator vibrate with an incoming message. The simple text displayed on the small screen would have meant nothing to alien observers, but every human in the galaxy recognized its significance. 3 words that activated protocols dormant for over 2 centuries. 3 words that ended humanity's long experiment with galactic diplomacy. 3 words that announced the return of something the universe had forgotten humans could become. Polite mode off. The message reached every human ship station and colony. Simultaneously transmitted through quantum communication networks the aliens never knew existed. In deep space facilities hidden behind asteroid fields and camouflaged among space debris, ancient systems came online after decades of patient waiting. Jake looked up at Counselor Vexthara with an expression that made the alien take an unconscious step backward. The transformation began within hours of the coded transmission as human vessels across the galaxy shed their carefully maintained disguises. Ships that had appeared to be simple cargo haulers and research vessels revealed their true nature as Weapons platforms that made alien military technology look like primitive toys. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UN's Harmony as external hull panels retracted to expose weapon systems that had been hidden for decades. The ship's innocent diplomatic appearance melted away to reveal something that belonged in the nightmares of civilizations that thought they controlled the galaxy. "All systems coming online, Captain," reported Lieutenant Dan Walker from a console that had transformed from simple communications equipment into a tactical interface capable of coordinating planetary bombardments. "Quantum displacement drives ready for combat operations?" Jake nodded as he reviewed status reports flooding in from human installations throughout known space. Colonial settlements that aliens dismissed as struggling farming communities were revealing defensive capabilities that could withstand anything the Galactic Council considered heavy firepower. Research stations were dropping their scientific pretenses to become fortified military positions. The aliens had never wondered why a species supposedly inferior to them would scatter across the most dangerous regions of space. They assumed human expansion was driven by primitive wanderlust rather than strategic positioning. The truth was that humanity had been quietly surrounding every major alien population center for generations. "Sir, we are receiving departure requests from Prometheus Station Traffic Control," Don announced with barely concealed satisfaction. The same aliens who had refused medical assistance for a dying human child were now desperately eager to avoid any confrontation with human vessels. Request denied. "All alien ships will maintain current position until further notice," Jake replied while studying tactical displays that showed the true scope of human military assets in this system. 3 disguised battleships had been watching Prometheus Station for years, waiting for exactly this moment. The Zephyrian Port Authority transmitted increasingly frantic demands for permission to depart as their sensors began detecting energy signatures that should not exist on human vessels. Jake allowed them to panic for several minutes before opening communications with a smile that would haunt alien nightmares. "This is Captain Morrison of the UN's Harmony. All alien vessels will submit to immediate inspection or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply," Jake announced in the same polite tone he had used during years of diplomatic humiliation. "High Counselor." Vexthara's response crackled over the communication channel with typical Zephyrian arrogance barely masking rising fear. "Captain, you are clearly suffering from some form of psychological breakdown. Human vessels lack the capability to threaten Council ships. Return to your docking bay immediately." Jake's smile widened as he gestured to his weapons officer. "Fire one." The single projectile that emerged from the Harmony's main cannon was not an energy beam that could be deflected or absorbed. Instead, it was a solid metal rod accelerated to significant percentage of light speed using technology that made alien physics theories look like children's drawings. The Zephyrian escort vessel simply ceased to exist as the kinetic projectile passed through its hull. There was no explosion or debris field. The ship was there one moment and gone the next, leaving only expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Where sophisticated alien engineering had been reduced to its component atoms, the silence on all communication channels lasted exactly 12 seconds before every remaining alien vessel began transmitting surrender requests simultaneously. Vexthara's voice had lost all traces of superiority as she begged for mercy from the primitive humans she had spent years insulting. Similar scenes played out across human space as Admiral Susan Hayes coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history. Every human colony that aliens had dismissed as helpless revealed weapon systems that emerged from underground installations. Built during the early days of human expansion. Captain Frank Torres commanded the defense of New Haven, where colonists had spent months preparing for this moment. The Krell punitive fleet that arrived expecting to finish destroying the settlement instead encountered defensive positions that treated 3-dimensional space warfare as an outdated concept. Enemy vessels are attempting to establish orbital bombardment positions, reported Torres's tactical officer as 12 Krell warships moved into attack formation above the colony. The aliens clearly expected to repeat their earlier massacre without resistance from primitive human farmers. Activate perimeter defenses, Torres replied while watching energy signatures appear around the planet as hidden installations came online. The colonists had used the months since the first attack to prepare surprises that would teach the Krell about human patience and planning. The alien ships never reached bombardment range. Gravity manipulation systems grabbed their vessels and held them motionless in space while kinetic bombardment platforms emerged from camouflage positions throughout the system. Krell warriors who had laughed while murdering human children discovered what human anger looked like when freed from diplomatic constraints. Mayor Ben Collins stood in the command center that had been hidden beneath his town hall watching alien ships be systematically destroyed with weapons that violated several supposedly fundamental laws of physics. The same Krell soldiers who had sealed children in a school building were now trapped in metal coffins as their ships were crushed into perfect spheres. "Sir, we are receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining enemy vessels," reported the tactical officer with obvious satisfaction. The Krell fleet that had arrived to complete genocide was begging for mercy from the humans they had tried to exterminate. Ben opened communications with the lead Krell ship where the same commander, who had poisoned their water supply, was now pleading for his life. "This is Mayor Collins of New Haven Colony. You have 30 seconds to explain why we should not finish what you started here." The Krell commander's response was a desperate mixture of threats and bargaining as he tried to assert council authority, while simultaneously begging for survival. Ben listened to the alien's panic with the same expression he had worn while watching his neighbors die from Krell biological weapons. "Your council authority is no longer recognized in human space. You killed our children for asking questions and poisoned our water for growing food. Today you learn that some mistakes cannot be survived," Ben said before ordering the destruction of the remaining Krell vessels. Colonel Ryan Murphy led the first human offensive against major alien installations targeting the Nexari administrative hub at Centauri Prime. His fleet did not bother with the elaborate orbital approaches that alien military doctrine considered proper procedure. Human ships simply appeared where they chose to be using displacement technology that made faster than light travel look primitive. "All vessels report ready for assault operations," Murphy announced to his fleet commanders as they materialized in the heart of what had been the most heavily defended system in council space. Alien early warning networks had detected nothing until human ships were already in weapons range of primary targets, the Nexari. Defense fleet scrambled to respond but found themselves facing tactics that made no sense according to established military theory. Human ships moved through space as if physical laws were suggestions rather than absolute constraints. Their weapons struck from impossible angles while their defenses seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Murphy watched the systematic destruction of alien military assets with professional satisfaction. These were the same bureaucrats who had dismissed human casualties as acceptable losses and delayed medical assistance while children died. Today, they learned that humans also understood acceptable losses. The battle for Centauri Prime lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, the administrative center of galactic civilization was a debris field slowly expanding into empty space. The Nexari officials who had spent decades processing human requests for basic dignity were gone along with their records of species hierarchy and regulated inferiority. Reports flooded into Earth Command from human forces across the galaxy as Operation Politeness concluded its first phase. Admiral Hayes watched tactical displays showing the complete collapse of Council military resistance as alien fleets surrendered or were destroyed by opponents they had never imagined could exist. "Ma'am, we are receiving priority communications from the surviving Council members requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations," reported her communication officer as dozens of alien governments attempted to contact Earth simultaneously. Hayes studied the tactical situation for several minutes before responding. 3 months of diplomatic outreach had failed to prevent the murder of human civilians. 3 hours of military action had eliminated the Council's ability to threaten human interests ever again. Inform all alien authorities that humanity is prepared to discuss new arrangements for galactic civilization. However, these negotiations will be conducted according to human terms at locations of our choosing. The age of council supremacy is over, Hayes announced while reviewing plans for the next phase of human expansion. The galaxy had taught humanity. 3 months after humanity turned off polite mode, the galaxy looked completely different from the bridge of what had once been High Counselor Vexthara's flagship. Captain Jake Morrison stood where the arrogant Zephyrian leader used to hold court over species she considered inferior, while the few surviving council members waited nervously for his attention. The great chamber that had witnessed centuries of alien supremacy now served as a temporary human command center. The elevated platforms that once reinforced strict species hierarchy had been removed and replaced with simple seating that put everyone at the same level. The symbolic message was clear even to aliens who struggled with human subtlety. "You seem confused about your current situation," Jake said in the same polite tone he had used during years of diplomatic humiliation. "Allow me to clarify the new arrangements for galactic civilization." The remaining alien representatives sat in terrified silence as Jake outlined humanity's terms for continued existence. The Nixari slug creatures who had once processed human requests with bureaucratic disdain now trembled at every word. The crystalline Vorthak, who had managed communications between superior species, flickered with nervous energy patterns. Even the few surviving Krell warriors had lost their aggressive posture and stood at attention, like soldiers awaiting orders from a commanding officer. The insectoid species that had murdered human children for sport now understood what real predators looked like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Humanity is not rejoining your council because your council no longer exists. We are not interested in your trade agreements because you have nothing we cannot take. We are not seeking your approval because we never needed it in the first place. Jake continued while reviewing reports from human forces across the galaxy. Dr. Alex Carter had been promoted to humanity's chief xenological advisor and now presented the aliens with comprehensive biological profiles of their own species. The data included detailed information about their homeworld's reproductive cycles, food sources, and technological dependencies. Information that should have been impossible for humans to gather. Your agricultural worlds require specific atmospheric conditions that can be easily disrupted. Your breeding populations are concentrated in vulnerable locations that offer no defensive advantages. Your industrial capacity depends on resources we now control through superior military positioning. Carter explained with scientific precision. The Nexari representative managed to whisper a single word through his species. Natural communication organs. How? Dr. Emma Rodriguez had returned to active service after her daughter's funeral with grief, transformed into something harder than the metal alloys used in human warship construction. She answered the alien's question with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to particularly slow children. You assumed we were primitives because we asked permission for things we could simply take. You never wondered why a species capable of quantum displacement would submit to your bureaucratic processes. You never questioned why beings who unified a planet through warfare would accept your insults without retaliation. Emma said while reviewing intelligence reports that detailed every aspect of alien civilization. The truth settled over the surviving council members like radiation from a dying star. Humanity had not been struggling to reach alien levels of technological development. Humans had been operating several levels above them while maintaining perfect diplomatic facades. The politeness had not been weakness or cultural inferiority. It had been a deliberate choice to test whether peaceful coexistence was possible. Your species failed that test, Emma continued. You interpreted our restraint as submission and our cooperation as evidence of natural inferiority. When we offered friendship, you demanded servitude. When we sought equality, you insisted on hierarchy. When our children showed curiosity, you called it espionage. Admiral Hayes materialized in the chamber through quantum displacement technology that allowed humans to appear wherever they chose without regard for alien concepts of secure space. Her arrival startled the Council survivors who still thought in terms of ships and hyperspace travel rather than technologies that treated distance as a minor inconvenience. The transition period is now complete, Hayes announced while reviewing status reports from human installations across known space. All major alien military assets have been neutralized or brought under human control. Surviving populations have been relocated to designated preservation areas where they will be protected according to human standards of civilized behavior. The Vorthic crystal being who had once served as communications director managed to focus enough energy to form words in standard galactic language. What about civilization? What about galactic stability? What about the future? Jake's smile returned, and every alien in the chamber instinctively tried to increase the distance between themselves and the human officer. It was the same expression he had worn during diplomatic meetings, but now everyone understood exactly what it meant. You had your chance to build a civilization that included us as equals. You chose to build one that required us to pretend inferiority. That civilization is now extinct, Jake replied while activating displays that showed the scope of human expansion across former Council territory. Human colonies were spreading throughout the galaxy not as supplicants requesting permission, but as the dominant species claiming territory by right of superior capability. The agricultural worlds that aliens had dismissed as primitive farming experiments were revealing themselves as sophisticated military bases disguised as civilian settlements, research stations that had supposedly struggled to understand basic alien technology were now producing scientific breakthroughs that advanced multiple fields of knowledge by centuries. The humans who had been treated as intellectually inferior graduate students were actually the professors who had been patiently studying their supposed teachers. "We will remember your politeness fondly," Jake continued while gesturing toward the chamber exits. "Unfortunately, you taught us that in this galaxy politeness is a luxury we can no longer afford." The surviving aliens were escorted to transport vessels that would take them to preservation colonies where their species would be maintained according to human standards of care. They would be fed, protected, and allowed to continue their cultural practices under supervision that ensured they could never again threaten human interests. Dr. Carter explained the reasoning behind these arrangements as the aliens departed. "Your species demonstrated that you cannot coexist peacefully with others who refuse to accept subordinate status. Since we will never again accept subordination, you must be prevented from making future attempts at establishing hierarchy through violence." The preservation colonies were comfortable and well supplied with everything needed for alien survival and cultural continuity. What they lacked was any possibility of developing military capabilities or expanding beyond their designated boundaries. The galaxy belonged to whoever was strong enough to claim it, and aliens had proven they were not strong enough. Jake remained in the empty chamber after the last alien transport departed, reviewing the transformation that 3 months of human honesty had produced. The species that had spent centuries maintaining galactic civilization through intimidation and casual cruelty were now dependent on human mercy for continued existence. Reports continued arriving from human commanders across known space as the final phase of expansion reached completion. Captain Torres at New Haven reported that the rebuilt colony was now the center of a thriving agricultural system that fed dozens of human worlds. The children who had died in Krell gas attacks were memorialized in gardens where human families could raise new generations without fear. Colonel Murphy transmitted updates from former Nixari territory where human industrial operations were producing technologies that made alien science look like primitive tool-making. The bureaucrats who had dismissed human innovation were gone, but their research databases provided useful information about galactic resources and strategic locations. Emma Rodriguez had established new research facilities at Prometheus Station, where human scientists worked without alien interference or credit theft. The quantum mechanics breakthroughs that had been attributed to superior alien guidance were now properly recognized as products of human intelligence operating without artificial constraints. The final message Jake received came from Earth Command, where humanity's leadership was planning the next phase of galactic expansion. There were other regions of space beyond former Council territory where different alien civilizations maintained their own versions of species, hierarchy and systematic oppression. Soon those species would receive visits from human diplomatic vessels, offering the same choices humanity had once requested from the Council. They could accept peaceful coexistence based on genuine equality, or they could learn what happened to civilizations that confused human politeness with weakness. The galaxy was vast and filled with countless species, who thought strength meant the ability to dominate others through technology and military superiority. Humanity would teach them that real strength was the discipline to remain civilized when civilization was not required for survival. In the ruins of what had been the Council's greatest military fortress, a simple